Servus and hello, Matthias Eichler here, and this is Singletrack. Lou Donofrio from Philadelphia is back on the show. It's been over a year, and after another stellar finish at the famous C&O Canal 100 just a couple of weeks ago, it was high time to check in with Lou on all his races and adventures across the East Coast. Lou, thank you so much for coming back to Singletrack. You've been on just over a year ago, and you sort of represented East Coast and shared a lot of cool trails and races that I had never heard of. And I must admit, I've since not made it out to your side of the country. Been busy with other stuff, but nonetheless, welcome back to Singletrack.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back. It's great. Love your show, and I really appreciate the content that you have.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And you had, just before we hit record, you had mentioned something interesting, and I wanted to connect to that because I just raced 3 weeks ago. I don't even know when it was ago. I raced Canyons, the big UTMB race on many of the Western States trails. And right, the hype around this race, as much as there are now, 1,900 runners, and most of them are not professional, or most of them have a job and show up just either for fun because it is their local race, or they're, going after their UTMB dreams. But most of them are amateurs. They're not professional runners. And you are, I don't want to call you amateur because you're a very serious runner, but you are not chasing a Hoka contract. Having said this, if Hoka would call, what would you do?
Right. Yeah. I think that'd be great. That'd be a cool opportunity. No, you're right. I feel like I'm sort of in this middle ground there, in terms of competition. Have some sponsorships and, have some fast times. I've run a lot of races, usually close to the front. But it's not my full-time job. And I've talked about this in a bunch of different forums, whether it's through Hammer or through Ultraspire. For me, most of my life, having been a runner from junior high days, with some hiatuses in between, but and running endurance now and endurance sports in earnest for over a decade, but also having a family and practicing law full time now for almost 20 years. Running can't be the main priority, even though it's a huge part of my life and just how I identify, and so many deep friendships. So yeah, if they'd call, I would accept it. If they're listening, that'd be great. Know some Hoka athletes.
Right.
But really, it's always time to fly.
There we go. Nice. Hashtag.
Yeah, right.
Well, so let's break this down a little bit. I mean, you are a super fast runner, and so you can be competitive, but it's not the highest priority for you. I don't even know how to ask this correctly, but does it entice you, or do you think about one year I should run Western States and try to see how I fare with the big guys? Because one of the beauties of our sport is that there's so many races and so many opportunities to run, but in order to really know where you stand as a really fast guy, you kind of have to run one of those big high-profile races, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. The problem with I remember even friends of mine who ran Western States before there was a lottery, and that's I remember a couple of years, when I, years back when I ran some Western States qualifiers and I just didn't get in through the lottery. So then I just kind of decided that, with schedule, literally for me to schedule things, I have to look at, and I was even just before the show, we were thinking about when we can get up to our condo in Vermont, and I was looking at my son's lacrosse schedule, and I'm head coaching his rec lacrosse team, not his club team, and they might make the playoffs. And so actually the one weekend that I had this month to go to our condo in Vermont, I think we're going to be, coaching lacrosse in the playoffs, which is great, and super happy for those boys and everything. But, so much of my race schedule is really dependent on my work schedule and my family schedule and what they're doing and stuff. So, to pick out like a race that would be, all right, it's a qualifier, and then do I get in the lottery and then go to do that? That's like such the hard problem with Western States. I would love to run it and then put in that training block to go fast, but also my training is kind of like like even after C&O, like I've had times when I've run 100. I was just thinking back a couple of years ago to like Tesla, which is a race on Long Island close to where I grew up, and I ran that 100, and then a week or so later I won a 7K, which was crazy, but like they're small races, but even now, like I'm pretty much recovered from C&O 100. I just haven't really been able to run because like all the work and stuff that I moved around to go do that just kind of came back around, and family commitment stuff. The to-do list at home is big. So like a lot of times training is just, we can have a plan, and I'll work with Carl and we'll put a plan together. But like he knows I modify it so much just because of what my life dictates. But the one thing that I would say is I'm always consistent. I think everybody knows that about me. Like I'm always going to do something, even if it's not the ideal training. So that'd be the best thing. I'd love to run Western States. It's really more of like piecing that in.
Yeah, it is an interesting challenge, right? We as amateurs, we often joke around and say, "Oh yeah, it would be great if the sponsors would contact us," but there comes a level of commitment and prioritization that is required that you almost don't actually want, right? I mean, you want to have the freedom of the family and the career, and I don't think Hoka could pay you enough to say, yeah, I'm going to drop my 20-year law degree and I'm just going to become a full-time runner.
No. That's right. That's true. That is true. And also, the fun element that's there too. Cause like some really good friends of mine who have, lucrative contracts and sponsorship deals on that level, not, and I'm grateful for, the support that I have, of course. And, but like, even on a deeper level, even on a deeper financial level, then there's an added layer of pressure there to perform. And you really have to block a lot of life out to do that, and be set up to do that, So, and this is still fun. Ideally, it should all be fun, really, because it's sport. It's not life and death. These are fun things to do. They're good outlets. So it should be fun.
No, for sure. Well, let's talk about your fun from the last year. So we had a year of racing, a year of running. Give us a little bit of some of the highlights, especially because you're running on the East Coast and predominantly, and so the names of the races and the locations by large we don't really know about. So tell us a little bit about what you ticked off.
All right, cool. Yeah, so I think and you and I spoke probably around this time last year, right?
I think it was a little earlier. I checked my calendar. I think it was in late March or so. Yeah,
late March. Okay. Yeah. So so C&O. Well, let's see. So last year, C&O 100 last year, which I also did this year. And that was my third. So this year was my third C&O 100 finish out of 4 starts. And let's see. So the summer, like during the summertime, I skied on June 1st at Killington, which is at our condo, which is pretty cool for the East Coast. They have one trail there that they keep open. They use that for the World Cup, so they build it up, and it's kind of like a glacier. So that was fun. Spent some time doing some water skiing with the kids on the boat, put miles in. I wanted to hit 3,000 miles for the year, so I just did a lot of miles over the summer, and really I spent the summer marathon training. I know there are some people, like it's not really exactly what some trail ultra people do, but there are some voices out there who will, like Wardians and Carl was great about working with me, but I think Ian Sharman, some people will talk about marathon training even for ultras. And so I wanted to run a fast road marathon. And so I ran Labor Pain, Pretzel City Sports. We talked about pretzels at the Liederkranz there.
I know. I was hoping you would bring them back up.
Yeah. And I plan to run it again for sure. I try to run that race so often. I think that'll be like my 8th Labor Pain. And I love Rana Helene and Pretzel City Sports. And so with marathon training and a little less hill work, though, I won Labor Pain, which was cool. That was the first time I outright won it. And that was a 12-hour race. Nice. So that was basically 100K.
Yeah, yeah. Congrats.
And then that was in September. But then in October, I ran the Atlantic City Marathon on a really windy, somewhat balmy, rainy day with a huge headwind. And that race goes from Atlantic City in New Jersey on the coast down that island to Longport, and then comes right back up. So you did have somewhat of a tailwind, but we had like 15 to 20 mile an hour headwind. And I was really trying to, like, my PR is still a 2:57 in the marathon, and I was really trying to go below that. And I'm like right on that bubble. And so I ran a 3:03, and I was below it for the half. And then, whatever, the wind kind of messed me up
That's
there.
that's harsh. That's harsh.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
close.
Yeah, but it was cool because it was the first time in a road marathon that I won an age group award, which was cool.
Oh yeah,
They had me
awesome.
like in third for my age, so that was fun. And actually, the first time that I stood on a podium,
Oh,
because
cool.
like with ultras and stuff, a lot of times like we have awards and people hand it to you on the trail or whatever. And even like in track and field back in the day when I won awards, like as a high school athlete, it was like medals and stuff. But they had a podium, so that was kind of fun. So I think my kids got a kick out of that. And then
Nice.
a friend of mine who's a really fast guy, he's been a friend for a long time now. Josh Irvin's a really good runner. He's run a lot of multi-day races. He was running the Harrisburg Marathon, which is, in the capital city of Pennsylvania. It's right on the Susquehanna River. It's pretty cool. And I wasn't planning on doing it, but I jumped into that. And I ran that a minute slower in 3:04, and I got an age group award there. So that was cool. And then I ran, believe it or not, I ran a 18 something minute 5K at the Humbug Bustle 5K in Reading. And that was
That's
the
a
end of
lot
my,
of fast times
yeah,
on short distances. I like my head is spinning. Usually
yeah,
I'm like
yeah,
talking about grinding it out on 100Ks and
yeah,
100 milers. Nice.
yeah. But for me, like it's that 3,000 mile a year base, really.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think that's, and maybe just some natural speed, probably. And also the speed training it's like, we'll do some big, and I have to give a lot of credit to Carl Meltzer, who's my friend and my coach, but like, he's obviously a mountain trail guy, but he's dialed in, hopefully he'll listen to this. He's dialed in a bunch of like ultra related speed work that we'll do. Like I might do like 10 miles worth of speed work,
Hmm.
with like various intervals and stuff, which is really grueling. I mean, honestly, to like do that much speed work on a track or somewhere else. But anyway, so that was a base. And then I ran the Icy 8 Hour, which I don't know if we talked about last time, but that's another really cool series. It's put on by my friend Alex Papadopoulos and Athletic Equations. And they're largely out of Virginia. And although he does do a race at the Delaware Water Gap that he keeps trying to get me to do, and I was signed up for it before COVID hit. It was one of the COVID cancellations,
Bummer.
which
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
really rugged race, like a rocky race up and down the Delaware Water Gap. But this race was at a state park in Virginia, and my friends Terry and Jesse crewed for me. It's at Lake Anna State Park, and it's an 8 hour race. And so that was it's a trail. You can choose your loop, which is kind of a fun format. So you never know like where your competition is really, because like they could be doing the long loop versus the short loop, and you're trying to figure out which loop you should do based on how much time you have left and how fast you're going.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
So that was fun. And I came in second. The guy who won it's a new friend of mine, a really fast guy, who cracked 50 miles by a decent number. I forget exactly what he put up, but I ran 46 miles. So that was that was a build up. Basically, that was a build up run to C&O.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like I didn't, and I kind of like didn't do a ton of miles the first week, like with that 5K and stuff, like, I backed off miles a little bit the very end of December, first week or so of January, it was holidays, and then just jumped back in and built them up for IC8. And then the IC8 run was kind of like a springboard for the C&O 100, which we just had.
Yeah.
And that was like 20 hours and 18 minutes. And I was trying to, my PR is 19:21, and I was on pace for that. And then C&O, we can talk about C&O, that basically like my right knee, like never really had it before in that area. Like the inside of it just like cramped up.
Hmm.
And as you know, like a lot of hundreds, it's just issue management and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like I walked on it for like 5 miles at around mile 80. But then around like mile 85, it was just that like running motion of coming down on it really hurt. And I
Hmm.
just decided instead of like blowing it out, I would just fast hike it in.
Yeah.
So it was still a strong finish. And honestly, I'm glad I did that because, with some ice and heat and stretching, it's pretty much back to normal.
Well, kudos to you for not. I mean, at mile 80, 85, you had to finish in sight, right? But kudos to grinding it out and staying
Yeah.
in, right? It's always
Yeah.
heartbreaking to see when people, and I know sometimes when an injury creeps in, people want to preserve themselves and not aggravate it too much. And so they, jump out and DNF or so.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's good to grind it out. I used to be somebody who sort of looked down on sort of what you were doing. Essentially, there's like fast stuff on the roads and mixed with trail and stuff. And I noticed throughout sort of my progression, completely uncoached, just wanting to go out and have fun, that I was just getting slower and slower and slower. I always picked the hills. I always picked the fun, twisty courses. And I ignored this trying to actually stay or become fast. And so
Yeah.
I now am embracing it and appreciating it to the point that I probably shouldn't say this on a recording. Somebody's going to hold me accountable to it. I almost want to run a road marathon. I
Yeah.
really would have never considered that. But I think the training and the focus and sort of the difference does pay off. And
It does.
well,
And it will enhance your trail fun
yeah.
too. Really, it will. I mean, I love trails, and I still, I think prefer trails, but running fast and running on the roads is fine too. And for me, it's like I can't always get to the trails, even though I'm really fortunate that I do have a small trail network pretty much out the front door, and I've got like a good park system that's not too far away. Still, like so many times it's like, man, I have, an hour today, and if I want to get
Hmm.
some miles in, I'm just going to get on the road. So,
Yeah.
you
No,
know,
I think a lot of people, there are very few people perhaps in Boulder or something like that, that
yeah,
really truly have like a run in and out, a ski in and out chalet,
yeah,
a place
yeah,
right on the trails where they have the luxury of
yeah,
always being on trails. But most of the time, even if it's like, a mile to your network, well, you run it in out and there and back. I mean, you spend a lot of time on the road during the week on a regular basis, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. But I just think it's complementary. It's not. I think they both complement each other. And yeah. Yeah, and speaking of Boulder, we were in Boulder last summer, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit too in terms of
Yeah.
the family. Before we leave racing, I'll talk about C&O, but just to dovetail off Boulder and then get back to it later. The kid, if you're ever in Boulder or anybody, go to Boulder Creek for sure and get tubes and put them in
Okay.
there. They in the city they have like this is just so typical of Boulder. The city built like a kayak course which is on the
Nice.
creek, but it's like a natural place to practice kayaking, but everybody tubes in it and just hangs out in there. And so, you can rent tubes from any one of these like half a dozen places and just strap them onto your car, drive to the creek, put them in one of half a dozen places and just float down. And it's got like natural rock formations and little waterfalls and stuff. And we all loved it. We spent hours there. I mean, it was really a great time. I had no idea that it even existed,
Oh,
but it's
that's fun.
quintessential Boulder that like the city built that sort of it's man-made, but natural-esque whitewater kayak park.
Yeah, that does sound fun. Absolutely. We're just starting to get some warm days here, so I haven't really thought of summer and shorts and anything, but I feel
Yeah,
like we can start slowly embracing this. So let's talk,
yeah,
do
yeah,
you have to kind of step back a little bit and give us a quick summary and a refresher of what that race is all about? Because it's kind of a unique race, and you explained it in the first episode you were on, but just for the folks who didn't catch that one or need a quick refresher,
yeah,
tell us about C&O.
yeah. So it's on the C&O Canal towpath there, which is adjacent to the Potomac River in that area, and that towpath is kind of like got a neat history. It was it was originally used back when, like when mules were literally hauling freight down the canal. And at some point, 100 or so years ago, we stopped doing that. And folks wanted to make it into part of a highway network. And I forget which Supreme Court justice, but one of the U.S. Supreme Court justices at the time, who was an outdoorsman, hiked the entire C&O path to raise awareness for it. And ultimately it became preserved as a national park. And so you could go all the way from the Pennsylvania border, all the way down to Washington, D.C. It runs that entire way.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
And it's got like cool, like campground areas. It runs through a lot of Civil War sites, and areas like Antietam is nearby. And, it's so many beautiful river views on it. This area where the races run is on the Maryland side, but it's very close to where Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia kind of like meet up. And it's right in that Harper's Ferry area of West Virginia, which is right across the river from there. And so obviously it also intersects with the Appalachian Trail, and the Appalachian Trail runs with the C&O towpath for, I don't know, maybe 1 to 2 miles or so. The White Blazes run together. And in that area where they run together, it's on part of the JFK 50-mile course, which I'm sure you've heard of JFK.
Yeah,
JFK is the big race. So I've done JFK 3 times. When you talk about that, my best time there was like 7:59. I think I can beat that. But that was good. That was, but like people win JFK now in like 5 something. I think that was probably like top 100 out of like 1,000 entrants. But that's a big race. That's a really big East. Also an expensive race, but a big East Coast race and an old race.
Big history,
and kind of a unique race. And it comes down off the Weaverton Cliffs, and then it empties out onto the C&O towpath, and then and that one then runs on the C&O towpath for a while, and it dumps off onto some local roads. So it's kind of like a hybrid. Now, the C&O 100 starts not in the same cliff area, but slightly, I don't know if it's north or south of there. Probably, I think it's south of there, at this camp called Camp Manadokin up on the cliff. And you basically drop down maybe like 300 to 400 feet on a single track trail. So that's really the extent of the trail running. And then you jump onto the canal towpath, and you first go north, and then you turn around and you run down to a town called Brunswick, which is south, and then you run back up to the camp, and you basically do that 3 times. And so that's
wow.
So most of it is flat on the towpath there, except for the climb up and down 3 times to the camp. And and that towpath, like when I was looking at canyons, and I want to hear you talk about the canyons race too, but like I know the West Coast trails like pretty decent from Utah and Colorado mostly, but you have like that really silty kind of dusty dirt, so to speak. This is more of like a finer gravel sort of surface.
Okay.
And one when you talk about with hundreds and 100 management, one issue could be like, really, you should run the C&O race if you're going to go for any kind of faster time and get like a running cadence going, pretty much in road shoes, and just be careful on that descent, obviously, right? Like not so much the climb up, but on that descent, especially if it's kind of slick with leaves and stuff, because you don't want to slip there and take yourself out. But you really don't need like heavier, bulkier trail shoes, because most of it's essentially like a flat roadish run. The issue though is that the trail sneakers, so I ran them in faster faster road shoes, not like a marathon flat, but like a hybrid trainer. And the material there is looser on the sneaker, so it can let in some of that like gravel silt, which when that gets between your toes and whatever can create some blisters. So that was like, that happened to me in the past there, and it's always a consideration. But we had a lot of rain the night before this race, and it matted down all the gravel. So it was perfect. We didn't have that issue at all. So that was actually pretty cool. But it's something that, like, I don't know if you've heard, like you guys, so when you're out there out west, and like I was, my connection to your state is obviously Badger Mountain, which I ran in 2012, in South eastern Washington State, down
Yep.
there in the Columbia River area. And like there were no trees down at
Hmm.
that, it was just these like dry mounds kind of. And then obviously you have like the tree line in various elevations, out by you out west. But here you're pretty much in this canopy,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's like springtime here, and we have like a lot of fall springs, and it's like cool, then it's hot, then it's cool, then it's hot. But like the trees have still are in bloom at this point. I mean, it's green, it's
Hmm.
not like late summer green, but it's green. And so you're kind of, some people call things like that like a green tunnel. It's not
Oh,
exactly
yeah,
a
yeah.
green tunnel yet, but you can see how when you're in there, you're just in this canopy.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's really it. And so some people like that. I really don't mind that. It can feel somewhat mundane to be like flat and just going straight, and you're kind of like in this canopy, and there aren't tremendously beautiful vistas that you're coming to or whatever. But the Potomac there is beautiful, and there are lots of rocks and different places and things like that. So when you have those views and you're in the forest, it is kind of cool. Um, but the challenge on 100 like that, whether it's that kind of road or a towpath or a track, is just you're using the same muscles over and over again.
Hmm. Hmm.
You're not breaking it up. So like obviously climbing up a hill and even descending can be challenging, but at least you kind of break that up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think that's like there were maybe 120 starters and only around 80 finishers.
Hmm.
And you would
Hmm.
say to yourself, like, why would there be that many DNFs? Um,
It
in a
seems
sport?
deceptively simple
Right.
on paper, in theory, right?
Yep. Yep.
But
And I think, and there might be a lot of reasons for that, and I really try not to speculate, because
Mhm.
everybody's different, everything is different, but some potential reasons could be, people might go out way too fast because it's just
Mhm.
easy to go out so fast when you're like, hey, this is just like a training run. I'm going out at my 20-mile speed. But unless they have a lot of 100-mile experience or longer stuff experience, what is that going to do to you 60 miles from now? And then how are you going to feel to finish it up?
Yeah, yeah.
That could be one thing. Weather wasn't really an issue. Um, but there's that. And then, it might also, I don't know, like the experience level, but sometimes, on the more rugged hundreds, you might have people with more ultra experience who are like,
Mhm.
I'm going to undertake this 100, and there's like 20 miles between aid stations, and it's kind of like remote. There's all this climbing, so it draws in maybe a more experienced crowd where you say like here, it's not as rugged. So people are slightly newer and just less in tune in terms of that pacing and fueling and other stuff like that. I don't know. Those were just some ideas that I
Yeah,
have, but it can be deceptive. Like a flat course can be deceptively hard for those reasons.
yeah. Well, but I also think like that. I haven't compared DNF rates in general, but overall, my feeling is 100 milers just always will have a
Yeah.
DNF rate, right? And I mean, I'm talking about canyons. I mean, it was carnage
Yeah.
out there, right? I mean,
Yeah. Was it really hot? I
it
saw
was
some.
crazy. It was crazy
Yeah.
hot, right? It was
Yeah.
and the weird part is that nobody expected it, right? It was like 5 days of heat wave that came on over onto the West Coast. Like I was comparing temperatures
Yeah.
between Olympia and Auburn, like the months leading up to, and I was like, okay, well, Auburn has the same, 50s, 60s temperature. It's going to be fine. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden, within 10 days, when we got the early forecast, it said, high 80s. I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think the 100 milers suffered the most from that. And then there were quite a few course changes that had to happen reasonably last minute because of the snow levels that were still on the higher elevation parts of the Western States course it was running towards. And so I think they had to scramble and kind of place the aid station at the right place and then figure out the cutoffs based on the new course and stuff. And so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there was sort of some sort of last minute adjustments that kind of aggravated the DNF rate a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Congratulations to you, though. That was a great finish there.
It was really, thank you.
Yeah.
I
That's a
appreciate
fun,
it.
cool race. Yeah.
I had been struggling getting a good finish in because I'm always too slow on those long distances, and it felt really good to never even remotely feeling like having the cutoff breathing down my neck and having to manage myself. But I sometimes, especially in the long distances, I hear faster people talk and talking problem management, and they're saying, well, things just didn't feel right, and so I took half an hour nap at an aid station and I recovered and I was able to sort of get myself back into the game. And for us slower people, it's like we don't have the luxury most of the time of a half an hour break, right? We are constantly feeling this like, oh my gosh, I'll get cut, right?
Yeah.
And so,
well, I would say though, don't the best thing is to keep marching.
I mean,
because that dead time of a half hour break there, unless you absolutely need it to, get yourself back in. So, it's all like the margins of time, right? So, like running at a 10-minute mile pace versus a 15-minute mile pace, like that 5 minutes times 10 miles or so, that adds up. And that's why stopping for a zero for a half hour versus even marching at an 18-minute mile pace, is a couple miles down the trail. And, a lot of times you can eat your cookie or, drink some extra fluids while you're moving like that.
No, absolutely. And I think, my attempts with the really long distances became too early on in the race, completely about management of all of the variables. And I couldn't enjoy the racing anymore, right? I mean, and for me, this Kenyans was really racing.
That's
was
cool.
never really, I mean, sure, there's pain and heat and whatever, right? But I never felt in a place that I was feeling like I didn't want to be out there. I truly enjoyed it, and that's
when it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And that was really great also for me mentally, because I kind of like doing this, but if you keep DNFing after a while, you're like, well, perhaps I don't like doing this anymore. And so it was nice to actually make it to the finish and get what I wanted out of it, which was, I mean, I was going down there and taking this great expense travel and stuff just for 50K because I was going to show the film festival, which didn't work out. But the big side note was the forced UTMB stilts. That is still sort of for me at the forefront of what I wanted to do. Which brings me to the question: racing in Europe. Racing on one of these big UTMB circuits, is that something you look at, think about, not on your radar at all? How do you feel about it?
That's not really on my radar.
Yeah,
like racing out there, just not right now.
Yeah, just, I mean, you probably should talk to the family and say, hey, how about the Alps this summer? And see what they say.
But that is a good segue into something else that is on my radar. But before we say that, I just wanted to say the UTMB, like that series looks really well run. It looks really cool to me. And this is probably, maybe we can talk about this, next year in 6 months or whatever. But that back when do you remember when the North Face had like their series?
Yep.
And they had some West Coast, like they had San Francisco, and then it grew and then it shrunk. And I don't think they have it anymore, but they had, like I did North Face Bear Mountain and North Face, they called it DC, but it was really in Virginia. And I thought they were really well-run races. Like it was cool. Like they, a lot of people did them. They had good food. They were well-marked, well put on, but it was always that cool. But like C&O is, old school and really well-run also. And like a lot of people having fun in the woods and just, more like, kind of like the core of what ultra running, traditionally has been. And I can see, I enjoy both of those things. And I don't think that there should be one versus the other,
I love that our sport, number one, has a history of grandfathered in permits, but also because we're utilizing public lands, right? We're not requiring complicated stadiums and then all of a sudden only private entities can afford them or something, right? I mean, because essentially anybody can go out and can get themselves a permit for a course. And in my experience as a small little race director out here, I don't see that no amount of money that UTMB or Spartan or whatever could throw at a public agency, Department of Interior, or would make a change in giving them preferential treatment in getting a permit on a specific trail, right? And I think that's something beautiful about the way we sort of are set up over here, that there will always be these races that are individually run, that have history, and I think the professional races can miss things by phoning it in, and equally the independently run races could struggle to get volunteers, and then all of a sudden the aid stations aren't what they should be or whatever, right? I mean, I think there is no clear defined what's better, right? I mean, it's always a great mix of both of it.
Yeah. So let me answer your question. So I think like racing in Europe right now is probably not in the cards, just because it's a good problem to have, but I'm just so busy right now with,
Sure.
and just, we have and a lot of good things going on. But one thing that we have done in terms of mountains, and not quote just East Coast mountains, which are super cool too. Like I do love it up there in New England, but like the whole family went out to Colorado last summer when I talked about like Boulder.
Yeah.
And the super special thing there was, and I have to give my kids like tons of credit, and I want to dovetail this off into another like side topic, but it was a 4-day trip, and we flew out from Philadelphia. This was the trip, right? And we went to a southern area of Rocky Mountain National Park, and then went back to the hotel, and just because I wanted them to step foot in Rocky Mountain National Park.
Yeah.
And then we stayed in a hotel because it would have been fun to camp, but we just, for 4 days, like lug all that gear out there.
Yeah.
And then I woke them up early the next morning, and we met 2 friends of ours, Steve and Amy, who now it's becoming an annual thing, going out to Colorado with them every summer. And we drove to Guanella Pass, which is the trailhead for Mount Bierstadt, which is one of the 14ers out in Colorado. And it's I think, probably a family friendly 14er, class 2, with some scrambling up at the top. And, literally having flown out from sea level, I'm so proud of them, both my kids and my wife, and we all summited Bierstadt.
Nice. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I have these beautiful pictures of them, at the summit with their summit sign and everything. And they had so much fun. And it was a long day. And it was that, as you're talking about, that like West Coast heat, which isn't necessarily humid, but you get that intense sun in the afternoon where there's no cloud cover.
High elevation, right?
Yeah. And no trees, or you're above the tree line. And it took a while to get up there, just because they literally were at elevation for like 30 hours. There was no climatization period. Definitely was not textbook, but
how old are your kids again?
And so at that point they were 14 and 11.
Nice.
Yeah,
good. That is just on the cusp where you can still do this. I've got kids that are a little bit older. When I ask them to do stuff like that, they just roll their eyes at me and go back to Snapchat. They're like, "Yeah, we're not doing." I hope you can preserve it for as long as you can.
Yeah, and that's a good before we dovetail into that. But so that was fun, and we were just out there, and then we also and then the next day I did Evans with my friend Steve via one of the access points, and so that was my third 14er, because the summer before I summited Elbert. So nice. I'm not really into like any kind of like mountain climbing type deal. I don't really know how to do that, but like a class 1, 2, or 2+ is cool. I'm not really doing class 3s or anything. So I'm thinking maybe this summer, maybe we'll do something similar, like a short trip out there. And I know like I've never been to the San Juans in Southwest Colorado, which is like in the Hard Rock area. And I was just researching it actually before our call, because I wanted to talk about it. And I bought this book called Colorado's 14ers, which describes them and all sorts of different routes up them. And I'm probably going to mispronounce it, even though I tried really hard to pronounce it, but it's Uncompahgre Peak, which is a class 2. It's most of the 14ers in that area are more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
This one seems more hike-ish than climb-ish. And so I'm going to try to sell it to the family that they should go for their second 14er this summer. And if not, at least get out there and be on some big mountains there. But that's probably more in the cards for us than like a big, European thing, as cool as that would be. But maybe, but like someday it would be super cool.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I've not spent a lot of time in Colorado. I've only for like some business trips. I haven't had a chance. I saw Pikes Peak in the distance and was like, okay, I guess that's there, but I've not actually done much. So it's awesome that you get to explore that area, especially also on a repeated level. You kind of start to get to know the place a little bit and stuff like that. That's super fun.
Yeah, totally. But I think, like when you talk about like your kids, we from an early age, we got them involved in so many different activities. And they've really taken a liking to some things that, are like brand new to me and that have, taught me a lot of things. I mean, like I never played lacrosse. And so I've learned a lot about lacrosse through Joe. My wife never played field hockey, but we've learned a lot about field hockey through Nat. And Natalie, I have to give her some credit. She PR'd in the high jump. She jumped to 4.8 as a sophomore, which was great.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So, but like as much as I ran track and sprinted, I didn't high jump or anything. So, but really like those activities kind of nowadays with kids, for better or for worse, are sort of year round. It's not as like seasonal as it used to be.
No, I know. I just signed up my daughter for a volleyball camp over the summer, which is great. It gives her something to do, but she's going to go like play volleyball, which the actual season I think is in the winter, but they're prepping over the summer, right?
Winter sport, right?
Yeah.
Right. But nowadays, there are those opportunities all summer round, and to kind of. So I know, like I already know that they've got camps and clubs and tournaments and stuff all summer, and really like I try to be at all those things, and that's what some people like who don't really understand endurance, to be honest, like don't understand who does endurance and what we do to do it, especially as parents and people with careers. And really it's just making it all happen. Honestly, like I have to give people who've inspired me and have told me that I'll inspire them. Like really it's just, about discipline and determination. And that's a positive thing. I mean, I've, heard people like almost make fun of that. And I can't even imagine that. I think that's just garbage because, that example has shown my kids what they can do. And they really believe that they can do anything. And I love that. And I love that is like the people who they've seen in their lives. And I really give endurance a lot of credit to that, have, shown them that with the right work and determination that really the sky's the limit. And it's great to be an example of that, honestly, and I think as endurance athletes, really like we should just, and as people in general, inspire people and lift people up, support each other. I think the world needs more of that these days and less, you don't have to be any like so-called, religious leader or anybody to say that we should support each other and build people up instead of tear people down.
I agree.
And I think, and that's such a positive thing, especially, getting back to what we're talking about in our community, such a big thing in endurance sports that I see.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's so important that we celebrate everyone who not just toes the line, but sort of, I mean, it sounds so cliche, toe the line, puts in the work, right? I mean, those are such cliche words, but sort of dares to dream, if you will, right? To be able to say, yes, I don't just want to do my work and then sit on the couch, but I want a little bit more out of my life. And if we can celebrate that, encourage that, and inspire that, it's such a beautiful thing, right? Especially because our sport is so inherently welcoming, right? There is so little requirement to participate. I mean, the shoes are getting more expensive, but in general, you don't need a lot, right?
Mhm.
We've done it long enough that we know that you need a lot of gear, but compared to other sports, it's still minimal, right? And in general, it's a sport where, and especially too in trail running, because every course is different. Every even season of when the route is run can be so entirely different that we are not comparing each other that much, right? I mean, I'm not feeling intimidated by your faster times. I live in a different world. I have, and we are still celebrating each other, and we're still celebrating the achievement, and I hope we can preserve that, and we are not only ending up, especially when it comes from the media point of view, focusing just on the sponsored athletes, right? I mean, I think our sport will always be greater that it will include everyone and not just the top elites, right?
Yeah, well, and I think, really people told me this and I believe it's true. I mean, running in general teaches you both confidence and humility.
Mm-hmm.
Both, because it builds your confidence when you're out there. You feel, hey, I feel empowered, and I think that's part of it for a lot of people is, why do you enjoy running? Probably for a multitude of reasons, but there's something empowering about getting yourself up to that mountain peak or getting yourself from here to there, as opposed to driving from here to there. If you're able to, there's
Mm-hmm.
something empowering there, and that empowerment is good for the soul, and it's good for people on a lot of levels. So it does build your confidence, but it also should make you humble,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, anybody can have a bad day, and you can train perfectly well, and you can end up with that terrible heat in the canyons, and we're all human too, and even the best of us and most talented of us have limitations, and it's
Mm-hmm.
also all relative. I mean, the fastest person today will someday have their record broken,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's next year or in 10 years or 20 years or whatever. And so, it's cool to celebrate everybody's accomplishments, but it's also good to remember that, there should be an element of humility there as well. And I think running is a great sport to teach that, because of, you're so dialed into what your body is doing, and what the gift really that is allowing you to do that. It is a gift. Every run is a gift, whether it's a training run or a race. It's all a gift. I mean, that's another reason to celebrate the sport, because there are people who would love to do that. Like, there are so many people who would love to, run your 50K. That's so worthy. 31 miles of racing in
Mm-hmm.
that beautiful area,
Mm-hmm.
is so worthy. And we sometimes talk about these like big numbers and massive endurance events, but a short ultra is still an ultra. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and that's a phenomenal thing. It really is.
It's true, and there's this sport. I think the confidence and the humility comes also in that the sport is so minimal and raw. There's so little we can hide behind, right? We can't hide behind a whole bunch of gear. Like, I mean, if you
Other
look at the,
teammates, there's no, like,
other
if the
teammates,
offense has a
perfect,
bad day,
exactly,
you
right?
ride the defense, but
Yeah, if you look at the tools that the top runners like Courtney's and Killian's and Jim's are using, they're essentially the same gears that we're using every single day, right? There is not sort of this elite level of, well, that person uses a $20,000 pair of shoe or something, right? And that gives us the confidence that if we're doing well, right? And we're just like, oh, wow, look at what my body can do. But it also teaches humility, because you've got nowhere to hide, right? It's like, if things don't go well, you can't really blame the gear. It's just you, right?
That's true. That's true.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
So
then the other thought that I had as you were talking, what's also amazing is that I think what is this endurance sport teaches us, it teaches us endurance in real life, right? Physically and mentally. I think I've seen, as somebody who classically has never been a long distance runner, as I'm sort of embracing that, it has made me a different person. I'm approaching life differently now beyond the trails, right? I know I behave differently, not just from a physical stamina point of view, but also from a mental perspective, right? I'm
Right.
approaching problem solving and stuff in a different way, right?
Yeah, that's good. So you
There's
know what?
nothing a gel can't solve.
That's right. Have you ever eaten a gel outside of a race or a training run?
I'm so not a gel eater, so I have not, but I have had my endurance drink Tailwind that I'm using. I've had that every now and then when I'm at home and it's sort of this 3 o'clock hole and still have like a few hours of work to do. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want any more coffee and I don't want
Yeah.
any junk food. And sometimes I just have that, but very rarely.
Little tailwind. What's your favorite flavor?
So during the races, I often go with naked because it's not overpoweringly flavored. And so it allows me to it lasts for me the longest. I don't get bored of it.
Yeah.
At home, I because I have so many flavors lying around, I play with it, and I mean the cola is good. I love the matcha, the green tea one. So they
Hmm.
both have caffeine in it, but yeah, I mean the Mandarin is good too. So
I've actually never had matcha. So I
like
see it everywhere.
matcha as an
Oh,
endurance flavor or a matcha as a flavor period.
either one. So I want to ask you about that. What's that taste like?
So what I like about it is that most of endurance flavors are very fruity and therefore very
Yeah.
sweet. And the
Yeah.
matcha is sort of herbaceous, right? It's sort of
Yeah. Yeah. Earthy, is it kind of earthy, sort of?
yeah, a little bit earthy, but green earthy, right? It's green tea, if you will, but it's the
Yeah.
green tea leaves that are ground up and mixed with sugar. And that's where the sweetness comes from. And that's why sort of people like the matcha better than basic green tea. But in sense,
Yeah.
and I like it as a sort of an herbaceous flavor, just because, especially on like long runs,
Yeah.
when you have a lot of that stuff, right? It's like always sweet, always sweet, always sweet, and that one
Yeah. Yeah.
gives you sort of a little bit of something else, right?
Yeah. 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 That's cool. That's interesting. I need to try one. Like our coffee shop has matcha tea, and I'm always like, meh. I'll just stick with coffee or get some mocha in there because I do love chocolate. But one of these times I'm going to try it.
Yeah, no, you should try it. And it's kind of a nice. I mean, it breaks your brain if you're a coffee drinker and sort of all of the accompanying flavors that usually mix well with coffee, chocolate, vanilla, hazelnut, and things like
Right.
that, right? Then matcha sort of when it first hits your palate, you're like, wait, what? But I mean, it's good as a latte. But it also works as an endurance drink, I think, really well.
Let's talk about Duff. I know we're running short on time now, but in terms of endurance drinks, what about beer?
Well,
Remember I showed you that German beer that my friend brought me, and I forget the name of that. But what beer have you been drinking lately?
so I don't know if you have grocery outlets over on the East Coast, but we have grocery stores, which essentially are smallest grocery store, but they're stores that take random products that sort of are starting to reach end of shelf life. And so
Yeah,
every time you walk in, you see a different stuff. I mean, they have some core products, but in general, they get pallets of, leftover Christmas candy and stuff, right?
yeah,
And so over the last couple months, so last 6 months or so, they've gotten pallets of this German beer that is a Bavarian Bübli. I don't even know what it's called, but it's this beer that I've never seen in Germany before, never seen in the US before. It's this German import. And it's like this Bavarian beer, and they had it dirt cheap by the case. And so I've
yeah,
been pretty much drinking that exclusively.
yeah. You'll have to send me the name of that.
I will. I'll send you the
Try it
name
out.
and picture of it exactly if you can find it. I'm super narrow, not simple, narrow in a sense. And I'm like, if I can find German beer, I will drink German beer. Over here. I mean, I'm perhaps I supposed to be supporting the local breweries, but in general, if I find it, especially if I find it cheap, because I don't want to buy the super expensive stuff. And I know the German labels, so I know what's real German beer and I know
Yeah,
what's faked German beer, right?
yeah, 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 yeah. Do you like IPAs?
I don't, because they're not really made by Germans, right? And the over here on the West Coast, the IPAs have been so popular for the past like 10, 15 years that every
Yeah,
local brewery always like IPA, double IPA, triple IPA, 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 IPA. And so you get it so often, almost exclusively, that when I'm looking for it, I'm like
yeah,
completely not going for it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I've been drinking this. It's a beer called made by Shed, which is a Vermont beer, and they've got an IPA that I like. If you
Nice.
ever see that, give that a try. It's called Shed Mountain Ale.
Okay. Yeah, well,
Um, and that's kind of a good one. But
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
but it's an IPA, but it's called Shed Mountain Ale. Yeah, you know, but if I'm not sipping, I have to give a shout out to, Hammer Recover right there in my
Yep.
Ultra Spire flask. Then, maybe I'd have a Shed Mountain Ale.
I'm fascinated. The when Germany won the soccer World Cup in
Yeah,
Brazil, it
yeah,
became known that the German national team is actually using as a real recovery and endurance drink non-alcoholic beer.
right.
And so
Yeah,
I'm fascinated by it because Athletic Brewing is doing. I find the price is too expensive for me
right.
to.
There's that Athletic Brewing Company
Ex,
too,
ex,
right? Which I've seen at some trail races.
Yeah, exactly. And so I like the idea, especially because it's non-sweet, right? And
Right,
it's made
right.
with real ingredient. If it's made with real
Correct.
ingredient, in general,
And
beers made with
carbs.
real ingredients, you get the
Yeah,
carbs in, so it actually
yeah,
works well. So I like the idea that we get more non-alcoholic beers that you could actually use. I mean, not
yeah,
necessarily in your flask while running, but I mean,
yeah, yeah.
I've been at long ultras where I knew I had only like, 10K left, and the last aid station, they were serving some beer or a shot of Fireball. And I'm like, okay, I'll make it to the finish. Let's celebrate.
Might help you.
Right? I
And
sometimes it actually, especially after a day of watermelon orange slices and lots of goo,
sure.
it settles your stomach to get something that's a little it's
Yeah,
non-sweet.
yeah. There's like a window there where it's good.
Yeah, exactly. Not too early and
Right,
not too
right.
much either.
That's right. That's right, Matthias.
Lou, it was absolutely fantastic talking to you. What's the next race? What's the next thing on your calendar?
Yeah, I don't have a single race on my calendar right now, but I am going to do Labor Pain in September,
Perfect.
and then I might follow the same book as last year and think about like that, and then a fall marathon. But that being said, I'm kind of like itchy to do um, some trail running and racing too, but just with the schedule and everything, it might be like a 5 or 10 mile trail race.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Super.
So, but I'll keep you posted. I'm sure you'll see it online or something. How about you? You have anything on the radar?
My coach is hounding me and my friend is hounding me, and I don't. And I have to be careful. My wife signed up for 50K and she DNF'd it. She got cut because the weather was the trails were completely muddy. And so she is due for a 50K finish. And so I feel bad to try to immediately schedule something with
Yeah.
I need to give her priority. And so I want to give her the chance to make a decision and
Yeah.
give her the first steps, and then I'll follow up. So
That sounds like a really good plan to me. I think any kind of deference you can show your wife in that regard will come back to you tenfold.
absolutely. I need to celebrate her and
Yeah.
stuff. We need to find a good one for her, and well, then I'll
Plus,
knock
it's
one down.
cool, and that's a topic for the next time we talk. But it's as I've been doing this a long time and I've raced a lot. Like, and to your point too, having fun. Some of those windows where you're just training and having fun and being out there without the pressure of there's a race coming up is like some of the most enjoyable windows of, and I think contributes to longevity.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
enjoy that time. Go out there and
absolutely.
run. Enjoy that time.
Absolutely. And for us, I mean, we're finally slowly starting seeing the mountains slowly. I mean, really not yet, but they're starting to melt out. There's the
Yeah.
promise of high alpine terrain.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see some mountaintops again. So that's my priority for the next few months.
All right. That's awesome.
Lou, I appreciate your time. Do you want to send people somewhere how people can connect with you? What shout outs you want to give before we sign off here?
I think, you know what, when you post it on there, we can just do a link to like Facebook, and that's probably the best way to go.
Perfect. Let's do that, Lou.
Great talking to you as always, and we'll keep in touch.